The fact that you can put a Neuralink in somebody's brain and connect them to that satellite, you can already see the process and the plan of transhumanism. So all of this is not something we have got to wait 100 years for. I truly believe that, 2030 is a designated time for a lot of things. And there are a lot of people questioning the fact that Jesus was 33 years old when he passed. And we've always said 4,000 years before, 2,000 years after, 6,000 years. There's always been this possibility that something would happen, just based on that kind of thing. And so I think it's interesting that the push for the Great Reset of humanity and the Fourth Industrial Revolution that we are looking at being promoted, and it is being promoted. World Health Organization, World Economic Forum, you've got the main people who are the main, what I would say, we've used words like Illuminati, we've used people who are internationalists, and there's all kinds of different names for those people. They all have an agenda. And it is a world agenda in which you're going back to like the Tower of Babel, where we're all thinking the same thing, doing the same thing. So how do we put humanity back into that cage? And unfortunately, we see on the United States dollar bill, we have an all seeing eye on our $1 bill. And if you understand anything like the bees in a hive, you've got a queen bee that's at the top, and then her vibrational frequency controls all the worker bees, and they do all the building of the hive. Well, we know in Scripture, when the Tower of Babel in the Old Testament was talked about, that was one of the worst things that God did not want us. And so what he did, he scrambled our language so we could not communicate. But look at today. We can communicate with anybody in real time because we have computers and AI that will talk to us and talk back in our languages. So we are, again, at a point of being totally controlled. And with all of that said, I can't see us having to, another 10 years. I think we are very close to midnight. And most of the doomsday, persona and things that are talked about like that, and people who study this, they'll tell you, we're like a minute before midnight, 30 seconds before midnight. So I really think that we are that close, because never in our history have we ever been to the point that we could all be made to use our biological DNA to be able to access things like healthcare, our money, buy, sell, and trade. But once that goes, and I feel like there's going to be a crisis. We saw that with the last plague, and how that all shut us down and caused a lot of different things to occur. But I think that was just kind of a beginning to find out how much will we go along with. How much will we take for granted because we're so afraid we're going to die. And Satan knows that. And so the game is, how can I make you give in to whatever it is? Because you've got to eat. You've got to have things for your children. You've got to get your money. So it's going to be a point where you've got to make a choice. And it's going to be a choice of life or death. And he knows that most people want to live. So they'll go along with his ultimate plan to make you believe you can live forever as a transhuman. And we're close to that. We're very close to that.
What are the risks for people that decide, I really need to feed my children. I've got to get this food, so I'll take the mark.
That's right.
And what are the risks for them?
That's the bad thing, is that if people don't understand what Scripture tells you, and I know that a lot of your audience probably, if they're not Christian, this may be some of the first time they've ever heard this. It's really important that, you go back and you look at details about what Jesus was about. And I know that there are other religions and other gods and other practices and whatever. And I studied all of them because I was one of those people growing up, even though I was in South Georgia, I was in church the first week I was born. I always had an inquiring mind. And so I always had questions about, well, what makes them tick? And why are they doing that? Why do they believe in this? I bring all kinds of science into my work, whether it be physics, nanotechnology, cloning, you name it, my books, astronomy, everything is in there. Because if I can take all the science that we know about and take the scriptures and bring them together, then you can see it's a solid foundation. If I'm standing in front of a judge or in front of anybody who reads my work, here it is. I've done the homework. Now, if you can find one little loophole in this, I want to know about it, because I'm not doing the work that I do to fool me. When I started doing this research to know the truth, I set out because I wanted to know the truth. My first library, which is full of all kinds of books from around the world and everything else, The deal was for me to understand who I am, why I'm here, and what's going to happen in my lifetime. Because from the time that I had that dream at age 6, I knew that I would actually see the end of time. And I wanted to know what it was about. I wanted to know who all this was involved with. And I wanted to know the truth, so I didn't want to fool myself. So my work is actually my homework that I did for myself. And all you have to do is read it. But the thing about it is, I really want to know the truth.
Yeah, so the dangers that people, if they take that mark, are things like getting your brain completely changed, like deleted. They could put somebody else's memory in your brain. They could make you angry. They could make you sad. They could make you stupid. They could completely, what else could they do? Yeah, they could just lie to you all the time, even more than is already happening. What other things do you think people could be, in danger of if they take that mark of the beast just to feed the children, let's say, and they need to get the food, and they'll be offering them free food if they take the mark of the beast, which is probably going to be in the forehead or the hand, but we don't know for sure. What other dangers are there, for them to,
the thing that
you've thought of?
What I have really discovered in the scientific aspect of DNA is that, like I said, we are all sound, light, and frequency. So where we started out years ago thinking, how could a mark be put on you that you couldn't get rid of or whatever? People thought about tattoos, and then we went into, well, if you had a tattoo, how are they going to find you? This situation is they can find you wherever you go. How could that be the situation? And so then we started talking about radio frequency ID, in which we know that a lot of people have had these little chips put inside of them, and including our animals, and that was one of the big things, was to put it in dogs, cats, cows, horses, and to even ping into our phones and into our vehicles after 2014. The intent to find you within a step of where you are. And so everybody said, well, that's a possibility, but the problem is now in the research that I've done is that your DNA is a frequency that's only unique to you. And for example, if we take out my DNA and put it in a petri dish and carry it to California, and I'm here in South Georgia, and if you traumatize me, guess what? My DNA in that petri dish reacts. It's not connected to me, but it's got my frequency, okay? So if you've got a telephone number, you've got a cell phone number, and if you're standing out in the middle of 1 million people at some ball game, and I want to call you, I call your number, and whose phone rings? Yours rings. Nobody else's does, even though you're all standing by each other and you all got cell phones, it's your number that rings. Your DNA is the same way, and when God created us, He created us no different than He did the snowflakes, who are all mathematically different. Every snowflake, if you look under a microscope, is nothing the same. They are snowflakes, but they are not mathematically the same in the structure. So the fact is that you and I are the same way. Our DNA is uniquely different, and so we are singing. And if we're singing, just like the sun, the moon, I've heard people say, hey, you want to hear what the sound of the ringing of the planets are? Yes, you can hear that sound. It's a different sound. We're doing the same thing. So our DNA is vibrating and frequencing all the time to make our bodies function in the way it does. And the fact that we have problems when we, let's say, have to have a transplant. We have to take medication to be able to keep those organs within us. But interesting enough, if you clone your own eye or your own heart, you never have to take any kind of drug to keep you from rejecting it. It literally is vibrating with your frequency. We are all tuning forks. And so what happens is you've got God, who's the creator, who spoke everything into existence, which is also sound, light, and frequency. He knows your song. So you are connected to Him. And you are vibrating at a frequency. So like the cell phone tower, when I call your number, you answer. When God knows you're doing something, because He says He knows everything we think, do, or say. Well, hey, guess what? If you're on your telephone and they're listening to you, they know everything you're talking about, and they can tell you where you were and locate you in the whole 9 yards. It says God has the very ability to know every hair on our head. Well, every single strand of our hair has a DNA in it that would be vibrating and have frequency in it. He would be able to know that. So if we can create our own computers that can do that, imagine the mind of God, the person or being that has no beginning, no end, and he created all of it. So he is like a great conductor over everything he created. He knows about everything he created. So if I'm a conductor in an orchestra, over an orchestra, and let's say I'm listening to the string section, and I want the 10th violinist over there to hit something, and that string breaks, guess what? I'm going to know it because I've got a trained ear that he just broke a string. The same way happens with God. When we are not vibrating at a certain frequency, he knows what we are doing wrong. And we have science to prove that, because we can look at, especially the latest Japanese scientist that did this. He took water, and he took regular water and put it in 2 glasses, and he spoke just nothing but beautiful words to this water, and he froze it. And he spoke very ugly, terrible things to this water, and he froze it. And when he took it back out and put it under a microscope, the one he spoke great things to had beautiful crystals that we're talking about in snowflakes, mathematically perfect. When he looked at the water that he spoke terrible to, it was very jagged and messed up. Because Satan was the first being that God created, he was over the worship. He knows about sound, light, and frequency. So when he gets you to do his bidding, or get involved with the lust of the flesh, or get your mind on something that the scriptures tell you to stay away from, your frequency changes. So in other words, that's why scripture tells us, keep our minds and eyes and spirits on a certain thing, because if you don't, then you're easily to be swayed away. And Satan knows that. So he's always throwing like little things out, little dangling carrots to get our eyes off of him, just like he did in the Garden of Eden with Adam and Eve. He said, stay away from it, don't touch it, don't get involved with it. And the moment that they did, he wasn't there when they did that. He knew that. He had the knowledge of their wrong because of their guilt. And guilt will give you a frequency that's vibrate. Well, if Satan knows he's gotten you down to doing something wrong, he's going to hit you with something else, because he can tell your frequency it's changing. And so God knows when you are changing. He knows what you're thinking. He knows by the very essence of how we're created, using sound, light, and frequency, as to what we're doing right and what we're doing wrong. So it is a situation that, with looking at the mark of the beast, you're looking at the very DNA. And that's why things like Elon Musk doing the brain connections up to the satellite, it will get to the point that our bodies are tuning forks. They're their own antennas. And some of the things that were put in some of the vaccinations actually caused us to become greater antennas. And when I was a little girl, we had like TVs and we couldn't pick up anything, and we had rabbit ears, and we would put like pieces of aluminum foil on the ends of it to be able to pick up the signal better. That's what Satan is wanting. He's wanting to be able to pick up our signals better, and if we turn to him, then he has your number. And so instead of using a cell phone tower to call you on a cell phone, they're going to dial up your DNA.